W.B Yeats. Yeah, his name is Y-E-A-T-S, but pronounced Yeats, not Yeats like Keats. Haha. Anyway, he was an Irish poet. For most of us Indians, I think when we talk of England, we think of those islands there all together and don't really make any difference between England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. In fact, when I look at their literature, I'm struck by their language, the way they approach life, their themes. So today we have W.B Yeats, a poem by W.B Yeats. And I think of the Irish poets, I think of the Irish writers. In fact, probably many of them think of them as English writers. I'm thinking of somebody like George Bernard Shaw, a very, very important dramatist, playwright of the 20th century. But long ago, when we look at the Restoration period, we had Congreve and we had Sheridan. And then we had, of course, a little later, we had Beckett and we had C.S. Lewis and many more. Irish poetry is different. Also because we have this entire group of poets who wrote during the Irish uprising, and they were called a part of the Irish revival in literature. So today it's going to be interesting for me, and I hope for you too, to look at a poem, The Lake Isle of Innisfree by W.B Yeats. W.B Yeats, 1865 to 1939, was a poet, dramatist, literary critic, and most important to me, an Irish nationalist. He is considered to be the force behind the Irish literary revival. He founded the Abbey Theatre and served as its chief. He won the Nobel Prize in 1923 and served 2 terms as Senator of the Irish Free State. A word or two about his personal life. He was interested in Irish legends and the occult, and a little bit of romance thrown in. He proposed to Maud Gonne. Unfortunately, she rejected him and married one of his friends. His early poetry was influenced by Keats, Wordsworth, Blake, etc., the Romantic poets. His earliest volume was published in 1889. And some of his important poems, which I've read and liked too, are The Second Coming, The Tower, The Wild Swans at Coole, etc. He is certainly an important symbolist poet, and imagery is probably his strongest point. The Lake Isle of Innisfree. Actually, a short poem of 12 lines, right? Let's see how the poem begins. I will arise and go now, go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, a hive for the honey bee, and live alone in the bee-loud glade. I think many of us can understand, appreciate, and empathize with what the poet is saying. For many of us who live in modern towns and cities, the cosmopolitan cities as we love to call, the noise there can become sometimes quite a pain. And so he wants to leave all that and go where? To the Lake Isle of Innisfree. Let me tell you, the isle actually is an isle which he knows because it is an uninhabited island, and where he is supposed to have spent many of his younger summers, when he was a kid. And therefore he says, let us go. And what does he want there? He wants beehives. He wants a hive for the honey bee, and he wants to build a cabin there. He wants that kind of peace. But in the first stanza, he is only talking about what the body needs. Let's move on to the second verse. And what does he say? And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of the morning to where the cricket sings. There midnight's all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, and evening full of linnet's wings. What is he talking about here? He is moving on to the peace that he requires, the spiritual peace that he requires. And the senses are very important, naturally, particularly to a poet. And therefore, there is what appeals to the eye, but there's also what appeals to the ear, the linnet's wings, the songs of the linnet. Let's go on to the third verse where he says, I will arise and go now, for always night and day I hear water lapping with low sounds by the shore. While I stand on the roadway or on the pavement's grey, I hear it in the deep heart's core. Isn't it interesting to see how the two, the body and the spirit, the inner and the outer, they combine, they merge, and they become one in the last verse. The themes, of course, are of nature and spirituality, labor and loss, and much, much more. An Irish poet, I can't but remember that he was very, very interested in the Celtic revival, all those myths, all their artifacts, etc., etc. So we have that in the poem. It's Irish standards, maybe a combination of the English and the Irish. The figures of speech, the metaphor is beautiful when he talks about the veils of the morning. I mean, you can imagine how probably the fog lifts and you can see everything clearly. The entire island itself can be interpreted as a metaphor for escape to nature. Somewhere he's talking about spirituality and he brings in the physical reality. In the last verse, for example, when he talks about pavements grey to tell us about the urban life with which we are also familiar. When a line seems to stop in the middle, caesura, just read the first line again and you'll understand what exactly I'm talking about. A 12-lined poem. 3 quatrains. Remember, a quatrain is a 4-lined stanza. Talking of merging of maybe literary standards or merging of themes along with the style, maybe. So I can't not recollect Indian writing in English. We are using the English language, which of course today is an Indian language almost. But earlier we used to think that the metaphors have to come from the English language, which means the English culture, which means when I talk about a river, it has to be the Thames, not the Ganga or the Brahmaputra or the Kaveri or the Yamuna. But gradually, as we became more and more comfortable with the English language, we moved to Indian metaphors. Well, is Yeats doing something of the same kind when he is able to bring in Irish standards or British standards and combine it with the Irish experience? Yes, I think so. And that's what makes such poets important and makes such poetry interesting. Do read more of them and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.